Every time I look at the clock, it seems that time is frozen. I just can't concentrate. Seems like I keep getting all these projects and all these interruptions, and then I try to just finish one thing on my checklist and I get 5 projects. This is getting crazy. I think I need a vacation.
A vacation? What do you mean a vacation? What do you mean? Boss, you just got back from a vacation. And we've been covering for you since you've been gone. You need another vacation. I need a vacation. Why do you need another vacation? We want a vacation. All the projects you're complaining about, boss, we've been doing the work. Why do you need a vacation?
A vacation? I'd be happy with no interruptions on my weekends off. Like, I don't want any text messages. I don't want to have to check my email on my days off. I don't want any last minute phone calls right before I'm heading out to go home. A vacation? He's taking another vacation? Did somebody said, who's going on vacation? The boss is going on another vacation. Okay, I'm out. Do not call me after I leave work. That's it. I'm done.
Yeah, I had a vacation once. Yeah, long time ago. Vacation. Who's taking a vacation? Boss is going on vacation again? I want to go on vacation. Hey, boss, I gotta talk to you.
There's a law in physics, I think, that when a pendulum swings back into a space, the energy of that pendulum swinging back is transformed into a force that when that pendulum is released, it swings forward. That force is swinging that pendulum forward into a space that is probably larger than the area where it came from. I hope that we are in a state of a process where our pendulum is in the swing back state, and that the force of energy of where we're at right now will be released. And so that force, it will be greater to swing us forward into a positive state, a positive energy state that is stronger than where we're at right now. Because if we stay where we're at, it's against physics. It's because energy is always moving. It changes. It's not the same. And so no matter how much we try to keep our energy the same, it's not the same energy. I think if we keep in our mind, the front part of our mind, the forethought, that this is a process and we have a choice to allow our energy to be better at where we're going than where we came from. When I saw that video on social media, I was shocked. And my first thought was, people are stressed. I really, when I really try to stay away from a lot of social media, but when it pops up and, sometimes I find it interesting because I use some of the content as research, not so much looking at social media and then using that as research, but looking at human behavior. And sometimes the human behavior is attention seeking. Sometimes it's mass psychology manipulation. I see that. And I usually ignore those types of feeds. And that's where a lot of the social media contributors tend to exaggerate or manipulate media or say things that's just downright not true and have not done their homework, or is very biased to swing a public belief into something that has alternative motives. And I ignore those too. I mean, you really have to be selective on where you want to spend your energy. Where do you want to spend your money? If someone gave you a large sum of money, whatever that might be, for some people it could be a few $1,000s. For some people it could be $100. To some people it could be $5. But whatever that large sum of money is, and you want to make the best of it, you ask yourself, where do you want to put your money at? And I look at my energy in the same perspective. Where do I want to spend my energy? If my energy is being used to look at media that is manipulated to try to sway a population into a certain belief, then what happens is the truth is being ignored. And so I look at these different things and I ignore it. However, when I came across this media where the customer was always right, was the title, and these customers are just going off on the workers, and it was specifically food servers, and I don't know if that is something that's changed in that field, because I think the service of food is a very difficult field. Um, you're trying to satisfy people, things happen, people make mistakes. And a lot of times people are not very forgiving as customers, they're not very forgiving. However, it seems that, as I look at this from a mindfulness perspective, some of the behavior that I saw is triggered by stress, burnout, dissatisfaction, the inability to communicate effectively. And so that's what got me on this topic of burnout. Certainly, the workers had it, and they don't know how to handle customers who are throwing things at them or using profane language. And certainly the customers who are not satisfied with their product, they're using whatever coping skills that they have. They feel that they're communicating that they're not satisfied with the product. But what is happening, which I think some of these customers are not aware of, is that their message is getting lost and is sending a whole different message. So sometimes some customers may feel that that's the goal. That's the definite goal. However, if you really want to make a change in any kind of business or your life, I think we have to kind of go a little bit beyond throwing things and using all kind of profanity. That's my opinion, and that's where mindfulness comes in. The burnout that's happening on both sides of the counter. I felt when I looked at that video, I think our society is at a point where we haven't been before. I mean, I've seen people get upset before, but this, what I saw, and so that's I started doing some research. And from 3 different sources, the Gallup poll, World Health Organization, and a AFLAC, which is an insurance. Now, you may say, oh, it's all biased, whatever. If different sources are relating similar symptoms and facts, there has to be something to it. And it's, in my perspective, I think a lot of what's going on is not to blame anything, not to blame anyone, but to see how we can make things better. The pendulum story. I think we're in a swing back state where things are stressed. There's lots of different chaotic changes going on. And there's a melting of the way things used to be. And so things are a little unbalanced. For example, technology. We are at a state of using technology where we have never been before. So much so that in reference to artificial intelligence, AI is putting its fingerprint throughout almost every industry, from the business industry to health industry to education industry. And on one hand, it's making things more productive. It's making maybe work a little easier. And so to fill in the gap where artificial intelligence and technology is helping us do things a little bit easier, the gap of that time is being filled with more productive or work production that is needed by a human. The work stress has increased. The burnout rate has increased, particularly among the Z generations, more in the Z generations than the millennials. And so I think this is something worth discussing in our podcast today. And so I want to share what can we do about burnout rather than maybe we'll just touch on the symptoms of burnout, because I think most of us are aware of how we feel. And I think that's very important to be aware of how we're feeling, what our triggers are. And is a vacation really the answer to burnout?
The waters are raging, the ship is tilting, but we know this is burnout. According to the World Health Organization, burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as a result of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Symptoms include energy depletion, exhaustion, negative feelings, maybe even sarcasm, growing mental distance from the job, professional improductivity, and emotional exhaustion. If we look at an organization as an individual, then each manager, each leader, each individual of that company is a part of that individual. And so we all would benefit for being aware of our environment, the stressors, the high waves, the peak workflows, and the symptoms of the burnout syndrome. We don't have to wait until people are exhausted, when people are snipping at each other, when sick days are being used as recovery. We can look at ways to improve our communications, strengthen our honesty with top-down communication, being transparent, create ways of sharing expectations that are real and not exaggerated, so that we think that if I exaggerate or if I emphasize a certain part of productivity, then our expectations of productivity will be increased. But people see through that, because when you have a workforce on the ground, they see if leaders and managers are not being real. And so what is really effective is when we have a leader or a manager and they can talk to the representations of that company, and not just the parts of the company that they feel are high performers. How about going to the parts of the company that seems to be lagging or having difficulty? That takes a strong communicator. And it's not easy, because even the leaders and the managers are stressed and burnt out. And so what we have is a situation where, on a macro point of view, if we look at the whole of a big picture, we pull away and we look at a company as an individual, and what we see from the outside, we think that, wow, that's a very high performing company. But in a micro point of view, if you look inside that organism of the company, each part of the company is growing frail, and they are barely making it. And so what is the surviving rate of that organization? Sure, you can fire people and hire more people. However, the informal line of communication is alive and it is real. And so the turnover of that company will constantly be flipping, and it's difficult to really reach a high peak of performance because you're always dealing with new incoming staff. Are we ready to look at ourselves, each of us, no matter where we're at in the organization as an individual? Are we ready to do a self-awareness assessment? If the answer is yes, then we're ready to make a change. That pendulum, remember I talked about the pendulum? If we're ready to make a change, then we're going to take the pendulum and use the force of that pendulum to swing forward into a positive area where we have not been before. When we can mentally capture the energy of the pendulum swinging forward, that's what I call burnout. Burning out, taking away the negative force and replacing it with flexibility, with healthy mental health and wellness activities, whatever that looks like for the organization, what it looks like for the individual. And maybe it could look like a mindfulness practice. Maybe it could look like a mindful walking garden in each organization. Maybe it could look like aromatherapy. Maybe it could look like words of kindness. Are we ready to capture the positive energy? If the answer is yes, join me next time in the next series of our podcast, Burnout. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again next time.